Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be, and welcome to the first in a series of enablement videos for IBM Connections Customizer. This talk introduces Customizer in a very broad sense, explains the concepts behind it, how it works, and what it can do for you. My name is Martin Donnelly, I work for IBM Ireland, and I've worked in the IBM collaboration solutions space for quite some time. I've worked in app dev in products like Domino, Rational Application Developer, Connections, and Connections Pink. We're here today to talk about IBM Connections Customizer, what it is, why we're building it, and how it works. You may be familiar with a project known as Muse. That project has now become a product, and the name of which is IBM Connections Customizer. You can think of both Muse and Customizer as being one and the same thing. Connections Customizer is a means of customizing the IBM Connections user experience. It is a proxy that sits between the Connections end user and the Connections service, and as such, all requests and responses flow through it. So it is in the unique position of being able to perform modifications of the UI. It can rewrite requests, it can rewrite responses, it can inject custom items, it can do predictive caching, it can do logging, it can do pretty much anything. Perhaps Customizer is best explained with some simple diagrams. In this particular diagram, we see a bunch of end users sending requests to Connections and receiving responses. With Customizer in the picture, those two steps become four. Customizer receives the initial request, it forwards to Connections, it receives the response, and it forwards that response back to the end user. This gives Customizer the unique opportunity of adjusting the payload and thus performing modification. But in order to know what to do, it needs a customization manager. That customization manager is the app registry, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But basically, a customization can apply to the organization at large, that is something that affects all users, or it can be quite targeted to an individual user or a group of users, or indeed members of a community, and so forth. So it's time to say hello to the application registry and see how it assists IBM Connections Customizer perform modifications in IBM Connections. The application registry is a database containing application design definitions. These are JSON files effectively that conform to the model depicted in the bottom right of your screen. As a database, it has a UI for administrators so that they can create, modify, and delete those application definitions, and it's got a bunch of APIs that services can use, typically to query what extensions have been registered for that particular service. A service can be Customizer itself, which is a headless service insofar as it does not have a UI per se, or it can be a visual component like Orient Me, Important to Me, Versa, etc. These services can expose customizable features, and we call those extension points. And an extension is simply an implementation of an extension point. So applications in this model associate themselves with a service. They're nothing more than containers that have extensions that can be one or many. If we look at this next sample definition here, it's been reduced to the bare bones, just the vital information. If I was to paraphrase this particular application, its name is Custom Communities. It's associated with the Customizer service. It declares itself as implementing the Customizer.ui extension type, so it's going to perform a UI modification. It's interested in the communities app within Connections, and it's going to perform its modification via an include file. There can be one or more include files. In this particular example, there is just one, and it is a JavaScript file called flipkart.js. That is the essence of a sample Customizer extension. On the right hand side, you can see how we represent that hierarchically. We have a bunch of applications that associate themselves with the Customizer service, and again, there can be one or more extensions within a given application. So with just two elements of information there for the type and the path, this enables Customizer to talk to the app registry and retrieve definitions of customizations to perform. We will focus entirely on Customizer.ui extension points in this series of videos. Customizer.api is reserved for future use. Path, on the other hand, you can see I have a sample URL here, connections URL, and all of them are deterministic insofar as they identify the connections application, as part of the URL. So in this particular example, we have profiles, that could be communities, that could be files, etc. These URLs, if you like, pass through Customizer as requests, and that enables customizers to build a query to the app registry saying, please give me all Customizer extensions of type UI for a particular path. So therefore, for this particular URL, it could query the app registry and retrieve any modifications or any extensions that have been built for profiles within a given organization. So with that in mind, I think it's time that we looked at a real extension, a Hello World extension, and that'll just take a moment. So here I am on IBM Connections Cloud in a trial organization on the North American data center, logged in as administrator. So on this home page, you can see it's completely standard. It should be familiar to a lot of you. The share something text I'm drawing attention to because this is the part that I'm choosing to change. I want to make an arbitrary change here to show how customizable things are. So as the administrator, I can go to Manage Organization and follow that through to Organization Extensions, which brings me to the landing page really for the application registry. There are no extensions, so I can add one. I've got a precast hello world.json file which I'll open here, and we can explore this. You can see it's very simple, and based on what we've seen in the slides, this extension will customize the UI. It'll target the home page by inserting a hello world.user.js file. So that all looks straightforward. I'll add that. You can see that it's been successfully imported. So all that remains for me to do, therefore, is to revisit the home page and see indeed if anything has changed. And you can see that share something has now been replaced by hello world. So that would lead me to believe that if I look at the source of this page and I scroll to the bottom, yes indeed, I can see the hello world.user.js file that I asked Customizer to insert on my behalf. I can click through on this, and if I scroll to the bottom, ignoring the bulk of the code because it's largely a template, the really important thing is here. Your code goes here. You can see that I look for an element in the DOM and I replace the text with hello world. So in something as simple as that, I was able to update the home page of connections. But if I can insert something that simply does hello world, it's nevertheless I'm inserting a JavaScript file. That JavaScript file can load CSS files, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of power at my fingertips right here. I hope that brief and simple video showed how Connections Customizer and Connections App Registry can be used together to customize your IBM Connections user interface. So to recap, all GET requests flow through Customizer. It forwards them to Connections, and when it gets a response, it talks to App Registry to see if any extensions have been registered for that particular request. If not, the response is returned to the browser in the normal way. If so, then the JSON that's returned from the App Registry is examined for a list of include files, and those include files are injected into the response. They would typically be JavaScript or CSS resources. Scaling that up, looking from left to right, you can imagine a slew of requests all flowing through Customizer. For some of these, extensions have been registered, so out the other end of the funnel come either standard responses, standard pages, or customized pages. A lot of power in all of that, so it probably leaves you maybe with more questions than answers though at this stage. How do I create, for example, those include files? Where do they live and where do they reside and so forth? So to help move all this along, the next episode will be coming soon. It'll be given by Christian Goodman, Chairman of OpenNTF and IBM Champion. Christian will introduce tools to you like Grease Monkey and show you how to get started. So watch this space. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you take on the next number of episodes, and we'll see you soon.